Welcome back to our IB English B Higher Level Writing series. In the previous lesson, we looked at how to construct an effective speech for Paper 1. Now we are going to see those principles working in 3 famous speeches. For each speaker, we will first understand the situation. Then we will look closely at the actual language. Most importantly, we will ask what an IBDP English B student can learn from it. We are not interested in finding techniques simply so we can label them. We want to understand how language moves an audience. Let us begin with Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address in November 1863 during the American Civil War. He was speaking at the dedication of a cemetery for soldiers killed at Gettysburg. His challenge was therefore larger than simply honoring the dead. He needed to connect their sacrifice to the future of the country. Listen carefully to 2 moments from the speech. We cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. Government of the people, by the people, for the people. The language is remarkably compressed. Start with, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow. This is anaphora. Anaphora is the repetition of the same word or phrase at the beginning of successive clauses. We cannot, we cannot, we cannot, but the repetition is not empty. Look at the verbs, dedicate, consecrate, hallow. The vocabulary becomes progressively more solemn. Dedicate means to formally set something aside for a purpose. Consecrate carries stronger religious associations. Hallow suggests making something sacred. So Lincoln combines anaphora with climactic progression. The structure repeats, but the emotional intensity rises. This is an important lesson for your own speeches. Do not repeat the same sentence in slightly different words. Develop it. Imagine that you are speaking about protecting public libraries. You could write, we lose a building, we lose a service, we lose a doorway to opportunity. Notice the progression. Building, service, opportunity. The idea expands. Now look at Lincoln's other famous structure. Of the people, by the people, for the people. This is a triad, sometimes called a tricolon. 3 elements are placed together. It is also parallelism because the grammatical structure remains almost identical. Of the people, by the people, for the people. But the changing prepositions develop the meaning. Of suggests ownership. By suggests participation. For suggests purpose. That is why the triad is memorable. It does not simply contain 3 things. It completes an idea through 3 related dimensions. Compare that with a weak student example. Our school should be safe, good, and excellent. Technically 3 adjectives. Rhetorically, almost nothing happens. Now try. Our school should be a place where students feel safe, where they are challenged to grow, and where they are confident enough to fail. Now the parallel structure develops the central idea. Safety, growth, confidence. That is much closer to what Lincoln is doing. There is another important feature in the Gettysburg Address, ethos. Ethos means credibility. But notice how Lincoln creates it. He does not spend the speech telling the audience how important he is. He does almost the opposite. He repeatedly reduces the importance of the words being spoken and increases the importance of what the soldiers have already done. That restraint gives him moral authority. This is useful for Paper 1 because students sometimes misunderstand ethos. They think they need to write, as student representative, I know exactly what students need. That sounds self-important. Instead, over the past year, I have listened to students describe the same problem again and again. Now the credibility comes from experience. You demonstrate authority instead of announcing it. Lincoln also gives us an important structural lesson. The speech moves through time. He begins with the creation of the nation. He moves to the present crisis. Then he turns towards the future. past, present, future. That movement gives the speech direction, so when planning your own speech, think beyond paragraphs. Ask, where is my audience at the beginning? And where do I want them to be at the end? Lincoln begins with remembrance. He ends with responsibility. That is rhetorical movement. Now let us move to Winston Churchill. The context is very different. It is June 1940. Britain is at war with Nazi Germany. Allied forces have just been evacuated from Dunkirk, and the military situation is extremely serious. Churchill is addressing the House of Commons, but he is also speaking to a country facing the possibility of invasion. Listen to this section.
We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. Immediately you should hear the repetition. We shall fight. We shall fight. We shall fight. Again, this is Anaphora, but Churchill uses it differently from Lincoln. Lincoln's repeated structure becomes more solemn. Churchill's repeated structure creates momentum. Notice that the phrase remains stable. We shall fight, but the locations change. Beaches, landing grounds, fields, streets. The audience is mentally carried from one place to another. This is accumulation. Each new clause adds another location, making resistance seem increasingly comprehensive. The message becomes, wherever the conflict reaches us, resistance will continue. The repeated future construction, we shall, is also important. Shall expresses strong determination. Churchill does not say, we might fight. We hope to fight. We could perhaps resist. He says, we shall. That is modal certainty. Your choice of modal verb changes the force of your speech. Compare. We could change this policy. Possibility? We should change this policy. Recommendation. We must change this policy. Necessity. Your language should become stronger when your argument has earned that strength. Now look at the pronoun, we. Churchill could have said, the army will fight. But that would separate the audience from the action. Instead, we shall fight. This is inclusive language. The pronoun constructs a collective identity. Government, military, citizens, the nation. All are grammatically placed inside the same we. That is why inclusive pronouns can be powerful in paper 1. Imagine you are speaking to your school about plastic waste. Instead of, students need to stop creating so much waste. Try. We created this problem through thousands of small choices, and we can begin solving it in exactly the same way. Now speaker and audience share responsibility, but be careful. Inclusive pronouns must be truthful. If you are a student addressing government ministers, you should not write, we in government must change this law. You are not in government. You might say, we all face the consequences of this decision, but you have the authority to change it. Now the relationship between speaker and audience is accurate. Notice something else about Churchill's sequence. It has rhythm. We shall fight. Pause. We shall fight. Pause. We shall fight. The listener begins to predict the structure. That prediction matters. When an audience knows what grammatical pattern is coming next, it can concentrate more fully on what changes inside the pattern. That is one reason parallelism is so effective in spoken language. It gives listeners a structure to hold on to. You can imitate that. We need policies that protect students. We need teachers who recognize pressure before it becomes exhaustion. We need a school culture that understands that achievement and well-being are not enemies. Same frame, different development. Now notice what would happen if you wrote, "We need change." We need change now. We really need change. Same words, no development. Strong repetition creates movement. Weak repetition creates redundancy. Churchill also teaches us something extremely important about ethos. He does not build confidence by pretending everything is fine. He acknowledges how serious the situation is. Then he argues for resistance. This is related to concession. You acknowledge something difficult or inconvenient before giving your response to it. Imagine you are arguing for restrictions on cars in a city center. A weak speech might say, "There are no disadvantages to reducing car access." Your audience knows that is not true. Your ethos falls immediately. Instead, of course, restricting cars will inconvenience some residents and businesses, but inconvenience must be weighed against the health, safety, and environmental costs of doing nothing. That is concession followed by rebuttal. Yes, there is a problem. Then, but here is why my position remains stronger. This is especially valuable at higher level because it demonstrates maturity. You are not presenting the world as completely simple. You are showing that you can recognize complexity and still reach a clear judgment. Churchill therefore gives us 3 useful writing principles. Use anaphora when repeated structure can create momentum. Use inclusive language when responsibility is genuinely shared. And acknowledge difficulty when doing so makes your argument more credible. Now let us turn to Nelson Mandela. The context changes completely again. It is May 1994. Apartheid has ended. South Africa has held its first democratic election under universal suffrage, and Mandela is being inaugurated as president. His audience includes people who suffered under apartheid, people who benefited from it, political opponents, supporters, international guests, and a deeply divided national population. So his rhetorical challenge is enormous. He must acknowledge the past without allowing the country to remain trapped inside it. Listen carefully. The time for the healing of the wounds has come. The moment to bridge the chasms that divide us has come. There is a great deal happening in those 2 sentences. Begin with the imagery. Healing of the wounds. South Africa is not literally a wounded human body. This is metaphor. The country's political and social suffering is represented as a physical injury. Why is that effective? Because political reconciliation is abstract. A wound is concrete. We understand what happens to a wound. It hurts. It requires treatment. It needs time. And, importantly, it can heal. The metaphor therefore contains both suffering and possibility. That is excellent persuasive imagery. A metaphor should not simply decorate an idea. It should help the audience understand it. Imagine you are discussing inequality in education. You could say, education should be a bridge to opportunity. But for too many students, that bridge begins behind a locked gate. The image makes access visible, but do not then change metaphors every sentence. Do not call education a bridge, then a seed, then an engine, then a battlefield. Choose one image and control it. Now look at Mandela's second metaphor. Bridge the chasms that divide us. A chasm is a deep gap. Again, political division becomes physical space. People are separated. The speaker proposes a bridge. Notice what both metaphors have in common. Healing, bridging. They are constructive verbs. Mandela does not choose imagery of destroying, crushing, or defeating. That matters because of his purpose. This is an inaugural speech. He is trying to build a shared future. So even his metaphors serve reconciliation. This is where tone becomes part of persuasion. Strong language does not always mean aggressive language. Your tone must serve your purpose. Suppose you are addressing a head teacher about a rule you oppose. You could say, "This ridiculous policy shows that the school has no understanding of students." That is forceful, but it is strategically weak. You are insulting the person whose mind you hope to change. Instead, "I understand why the school introduced this policy. The concern behind it is legitimate. Where I disagree is with the assumption that a complete ban is the only solution." Now you have concession and rebuttal. You also create ethos because you sound fair. You are not refusing to listen. You are showing that you have listened and still disagree. Return to Mandela's sentences. The time has come. The moment has come. This is parallelism. The two sentences follow almost the same grammatical structure. There is also epistrophe. Epistrophe is the repetition of a word or phrase at the end of successive clauses or sentences. Anaphora repeats at the beginning. Epistrophe repeats at the end. Here both statements finish with "has come." That repeated ending creates a sense of inevitability. The time has arrived. The moment has arrived. The speech is not asking whether reconciliation should begin at some unspecified point in the future. The language says, "now." That creates urgency without aggression. Notice also the pronoun us. The chasms divide us. Again, inclusive language. Mandela does not describe South Africa entirely as us and them. His language works to create a new collective identity. This is particularly significant because the political problem itself has been division. The grammar, therefore, serves the politics of the speech. That is something you should notice as an HL student. A sophisticated technique is not necessarily a complicated word. Sometimes one pronoun can reveal the entire relationship between speaker and audience. We, our, us, or you, they, them. Pronouns construct relationships. Choose them deliberately. Mandela's speech also moves from past suffering towards future construction. That progression is fundamental. A weaker speech about injustice may spend every paragraph describing how terrible the problem is. But persuasion needs somewhere to go. Problem, consequence, possibility, solution, action. Mandela acknowledges the wound, but he also introduces healing. He acknowledges the divide, but he introduces the bridge. That is rhetorical movement through metaphor. And this gives us a useful way to compare all three speakers. Lincoln is speaking after enormous loss. His language transforms remembrance into responsibility. Churchill is speaking during enormous danger. His language transforms fear into determination. Mandela is speaking after enormous division. His language transforms past suffering into the possibility of reconstruction. Different situations, different tones, different techniques. But the underlying principle is the same. The speaker knows where the audience is emotionally and intellectually at the beginning. Then the language moves them somewhere else. That is what you need to achieve in paper 1. Do not begin by thinking, "I need anaphora. I need a metaphor. I need a rhetorical question." Begin with the communication problem. Suppose your audience feels disconnected from the issue. You may need pathos. Give them a person, a place, a consequence they can imagine. Suppose your audience doubts you. Build ethos. Use relevant experience, fairness, and concession. Suppose your argument is complicated. Develop logos, claim, reason, evidence or example, consequence. Suppose one idea needs to become memorable. Use anaphora, epistrophe, or parallelism. Suppose 3 dimensions complete an idea. Use a triad. Suppose the audience needs an abstract problem made visible. Use metaphor. Suppose the issue involves a clear choice. Use antithesis. Suppose responsibility is genuinely shared. Use inclusive pronouns. And when you finally need action, strengthen your language. Could, should, must, then perhaps, consider. Protect, demand, act. The important point is that rhetorical techniques should emerge from purpose. Lincoln does not use a triad simply because triads sound impressive. Churchill does not repeat "we shall" because somebody told him speeches require repetition. Mandela does not use healing and bridging imagery simply because metaphors make language sophisticated. The technique solves a rhetorical problem. Lincoln needs to compress democratic purpose into something memorable. Churchill needs to create collective determination. Mandela needs to make reconciliation feel both urgent and possible. Do not decorate your argument. Construct it. Then ask what language will make each stage work. And when you analyze a famous speech, do not stop at, "This is Anaphora." Go further. What is repeated? What changes? What develops? What does the audience begin to feel or understand? Why is this technique appropriate to this audience, this context, and this purpose? And finally, how could I use the same principle in my own speech? That final question is the most useful one, because the goal is not to sound like Lincoln, Churchill, or Mandela. The goal is to understand what they understood. A speech becomes powerful when its language gives the audience somewhere to go.